Okay, it is Saturday, and I know we're all eating breakfast, and I'm going to try and wake everyone up. So, here we go. Who met someone new this week? Yay! Who learned something new this week? Whose brain is so full and they have all their lists of things to go through when they get home and look up? Okay, I'm not the only one. Anyways, more to come. Here we go. Next session. Lots of good information. I'm so excited that all you guys are here. I'm Rachel Rich. I'm from UAB. I guess I should start with that. And then Mael is from Baylor, and we will be your moderators / speakers today. I'm going to let you go.
Okay, when no has presentation disclaimer, in this session, our objective is to describe the essential elements of FDA audit, readiness, and summarize strategies to maintain compliance in daily operation. Also, we demonstrate how to organize documentation and process in a way that supports continued FDA inspection readiness. And the last time, we analyzed common gaps identified during FDA inspection and differentiate between proactive and reactive compliance approach. And then you start the first panelist.
Yes, I'm going to intro our first speaker, Kelly. She's a research project manager from Providence Medical Research Center in Spokane, so Washington local. She serves as the research project manager at her research center, where she specializes in study startup, onboarding, and mentoring new clinical research coordinators. She also does internal auditing, CAPA management, and ensuring site audit readiness. With extensive experience across diverse therapeutic areas, Kelly coordinates clinical trials for both industry-sponsored and investigator-initiated trials. Kelly began her research career as a research assistant in 2011 and advanced to a research coordinator in 2012. She earned her CCRC certification through ACRP in November of 2014. After dedicating 21 years to cardiology, she joined Providence Medical Research Center in 2021 and has been with the Cystic Fibrosis team since July 22. Beyond her professional endeavors, Kelly enjoys traveling to the Hawaiian Islands and spending time with family and friends. Welcome, Kelly.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm going to get this brought up here. Disclosure, I'm on the Seattle Children's and Vision Steering Committee, but no, I'm not getting paid for this. Let's see, who here has gone through an FDA audit? Show of hands. Okay, awesome. I personally have never been through an FDA audit, but in 2012, my institution did go through an audit. And backstory, the institution at the time, I was actually with another group that one of the investigator and team joined that institution that I'm partly with now. But anyways, what we went through caused a lot of PTSD. And I guess it sparked my desire to learn everything I could about FDA audits and how to be a good coordinator, and what I could do to make not only my studies look good, but also my coworkers' studies look good, and by default, our PI and our department look good. Excuse me, I'll talk a little bit about what that audit entailed and how I came to be where I am today. So getting ready for this presentation, I really wanted to know, considering I haven't personally been through one and I've been in research since 2011, how many FDA audits are conducted annually? So I went to this website, it's the US government of, I wrote it down, of course I can't read it. And I was kind of shocked that the audits peaked in 2017, but then it started to dwindle. I don't know what happened in 2017 or 2018, I guess I can guess, but I was surprised. So there was actually a study done by the government. I really want to tell you guys what this name is. Hold on just 2 seconds. It is, you're right, I can't read the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Anyways, they did a study to find out why. What was why is it trending downwards? We're losing investigators. So if you're interested in what their mission is to try to see how to get investigators back, suggest going to this page because it was really interesting. I actually spent a lot of time on it last night. But anyways, I'm going to put this here if I can't read it. The type of inspections that are triggered are the main three ones are surveillance, monitoring the manufacturing process of drug and devices. Another one for cause. This is the one that we had, triggered potential quality problems to follow up on complaints, and then application-based. There, obviously, the FDA is going in to verify reliability, integrity, and compliance of clinical and non-clinical research. So at the time of our, I say our because, like I said, I was part of the team before they left to go to Providence. They had a for-cause inspection on a device, and what we learned from that is it really, there was actually no training, and you can't go to college to be a research coordinator. And at the time, our managers had this, they just thought if you're a nurse, you knew how to do research. And there was, I felt like that we really lacked training on how to conduct a clinical trial in the aspect of waiting, like what could happen if the FDA shows up, documentation. How we document clinically is not the same how we document in research. I was really kind of surprised when I was talking to my nurses, and if you weren't a nurse, you had way more training. We were out on the floor for 6 months before we could consent on our own. But if you were a nurse, by the way, my background is not of a nurse. My background is an EMT, also a cardiac arrhythmia tech, and I was a medical assistant back in the early 2000s. So I had a lot of clinical care experience, but I didn't have the nursing aspect experience, I guess. So we had to go through months of training before we were cut loose. And nurses, they were thrown to the wolves. And it was really sad because I felt like they were the ones that were dealing with a lot of the hard inspection issues, the auditing issues, because, there's a difference between an FDA inspection and an audit, a sponsor audit. None of our studies were going through that, the non-RN coordinators. So I wanted to take a different approach after speaking to one of my nurses. She's like, how can we do this? How can we change this? And I didn't really get to change that where I was originally, which was at Heart Clinics Northwest or at Kootenai Health, because they quit hiring nurses. And I don't blame them because nurses weren't applying. So I think that there was like this, on the word on the street, don't go there because this was what was happening. Since then, we have changed that. So if you see any job openings there, I promise it's changed. But anywho, going forward, we also learned this at my new institution. So I just want to talk about what you do when you first get that knock, because we have developed either get a knock or a doorbell. Well, at our site, we have a doorbell. It's weird. But we get the knock on the door. What are you going to do? 10 years ago, I would have said, the knock comes, I'm running, because I talk way too much. You're going to find that out in the next 30 minutes, but I talk a lot. I didn't realize that they weren't our friend. I thought, come on in. I'm going to get you a cup of coffee. We're going to have a good time. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this study. And they're like, no, you're not. You're just going to give them the facts. But I'm like, but a lot of my stuff is up here. And they're like, no, this is really learned how to document in research. And so you get that knock. Who's there? The FDA with their 482 saying they're going to inspect. We had this kind of happened a couple months ago or maybe 6 months ago. We got a phone call though, so never had that. And we all scrambled. But I'm like, why are we scrambling? We know we got this. We just did our mock audit 2 years ago. It wasn't for us, it was for the IRB. So we were so happy about that. But anyways, who can relate to this feeling when you get that knock or that phone call? This was inspired by Steve Carell's Michael Scott. It got flagged. I had to take it out. So I love AI and I love my job. But who can relate to this feeling? We call this the poop cramp feeling, right? So we don't want to feel like this, and we shouldn't have to feel like this. If we do our job right and we do it well, we shouldn't have to feel like this. But it's okay to have a little bit of anxiety. I had a doctor tell me, Kelly, your anxiety is okay. It keeps you honest. Maybe too honest sometimes, but I like it because it does. I had one of my I mentor. There was a time I was mentoring 4 coordinators, Lauren being one of them, up here in the front row, at once. And one of them came up to me and said, "How do you do this so well?" And I'm like, I'm scared of messing up. I'm scared of disappointing my coworkers, and I'm scared of the FDA coming in and being like, where is this information, and not having it for them. So we developed a cycle at our, being FDA audit ready is a continuous cycle. It's constantly changing. Research, I've been in this field for almost 15 years. Everything has changed over the years. We have new guidelines, new SOPs. We have, every protocol is different. Whether you're doing investigator-initiated, IND, a drug study, device trial, just a observational study, every single protocol is different. And you really have to treat it as such. How you document things. You have to plan for what are you going to do when the FDA shows up, and then execute the things that you plan on doing. Check your work. Make sure that your work that you're doing is right. How do we check it? Monitoring, and then acting, teaching. So I'm going to go through the life cycle here of what we developed at our institution. Planning. I'm a planner. I plan for everything. I plan what to do if I don't make it here because the plane goes down. I plan what to do if I get struck by a bus, which almost happened yesterday. So I plan for everything because if somebody has to step in, I want them to be able to know what they're doing in my departure. Develop and maintain SOPs for critical processes. I came from a site that had 0 SOPs. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait for the day that I get to go to a place that has SOPs. Now I have 100 SOPs. We have an SOP on how to change the water. So be careful for what you wish for. But I do love that we have a specific SOP for FDA audits. We have an SOP for how to, our certified copies, how we get our EMR, how we use our EMR, how we destroy IP, all those things that I know that the FDA could ask for. So I do love those kind of SOPs. I don't love that we need to have an SOP for changing the water. Anyways, defining the roles and responsibilities within your organization, knowing who does what. Everybody has somebody that has their special niche. A billing person, how to do VELOS, our CTMS. We have somebody who has actually gone through FDA audits or are familiar with FDA audits. Documentation, your EMR special. Know whose role and how they're going to play a part when the inspector comes. And then I think as a site and even as a coordinator, know your risk. What are they looking for? If you know that, and you document everything, you've got it down. So my next is talking about, well, this is the SOPs, because I wished I could share what our SOPs look like. And how many of you guys have SOP audit SOPs? Okay. I really love that we have that. We've updated it in the last couple of years because things have changed. But guys, it really was beneficial to know what I like to say, who's who in the zoo. Who are we going to call? We actually wear a buddy badge. I wish I would have brought it with me. It's a buddy badge that says FDA, what to do. We're labeled research, but what to do when they actually show up. Because sometimes we all have that. We know what to do, then they knock on the door, and what do you do? So I asked if we could share our SOPs because I didn't know who had them. They said no, of course. But I can do snippets. So our key roles, we have people assigned. We know the first person that's going to get that is the initial contact. It's likely going to be it's always going to be a coordinator at our site because we're the only ones that answer the door. Then who do we contact? We let our manager know. And if our manager's not there, then we let Cammie, our operations supervisor, know. And if she's not there, then unfortunately it's me. But we have we want this is designated, we have this everywhere in our department so that we can see who we need to know, our contact. We have something in progress, what are we going to do? Then we assign duties to people. And this is an example of who you would have helping with an audit, you have your chaperone, and like I said, this is just an example of what their duties could be. What your admin assistant would be doing, what your regulatory specialist would be doing, what your coordinator would be doing, your backup, your manager, because we shut down the office when this happens. Everybody comes to a screeching halt, visits get canceled, and we focus on this. And I really wish that I could be a part of something like this instead of the planning, but I feel like we've got this down, that we would be ready. I don't want to jinx myself. But I think that we didn't have this where I came from at all. So I'm really glad that we have this where I'm at now, and that we're, making it, I think, even better. And then, of course, it helps to have a knowledgeable manager who can help. She takes, I think, a lot of the stress off of the coordinator, because she's dealing with that piece of it while we're dealing with the trial piece of it. And then our PI. We have to make our PI be like completely available. And fortunately, we have wonderful PIs who are. We can text them in the middle of the night. The risks, knowing your risks. These are the things that we focus on. Does your PI know that if there's protocol deviations in the study? Do they know all the safety AEs that have been reported? Do they know, do you and your PI know about IP, how it's stored, where it's stored, who dispenses it? How do you guys keep track of it? Were there any consenting issues? Is your investigator site file organized? Do you guys use electronic? Do you use paper? Were there any CAPAs that occurred that needed to be implemented? And was there oversight by the PI for all of this? And in our institution, we meet monthly with our PIs, if not weekly. I don't just do CF, so I know a lot of you guys here are lucky to just be in CF, but we have 13 coordinators. We do everything from CF, oncology, cardiology, pulmonology, ortho. So we're running all over our institution, and we go between two hospitals, and we also oversee a hospital in Missoula, Montana. So we try our best to make sure that our PI is aware of everything. So we try to make PI oversight meetings, document those meetings. So when the FDA asks, where's the oversight, we can show that to them. So these are your risks. And I always say, pay attention to these, because when I'm mentoring a new coordinator, I'm telling them, how are you documenting your protocol deviations? And where's your little mini CAPA to show how you're going to prevent these from happening? So I'll show you that slide later. On the do part of our plan, this is what I always tell our coordinators and our PIs, Alcoa, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. I'm also very guilty of this. I was very guilty of this early on, because if you're seeing 2 patients a day, you forget to document. I truly believe it was an easier world 15 years ago when we just used paper, because you had your paper binders. Who's here remembers that, right? Well, I love it. I never thought I would say this, because I love technology, but I feel like it's hurting us. I feel like it's taking us longer, because you have to document it in your binder, you have to put it in the EDC, then you have to go into the EMR, but document. And now we don't even care. I tell the coordinators, I don't care in the EMR, just put visit happened, see study binder for details, so that it's somewhere. Collect and maintain real-time documentation, training logs and DOAs. Make sure that your staff is properly trained, and that your PI has delegated and signed off, and that appropriate tasks are signed. I just recently took over from the former CF coordinator, Joan. She retired, and she assigned me to be an ophthalmologist in one of our studies. She really didn't. It was just her. She's got lovely penmanship. So I'm like, okay, now I have to go do a note to file saying I'm not that. I promise I did not perform any of those duties. Just to show, because an auditor and inspector could say, well, you were assigned that from this to this. Did you do that? No, I didn't. So here's my notes to file saying that I didn't do it. I could argue that it really was an S7 and not a 4, but I'm not going to argue with the inspector. So that's why we caught it ahead of time. And then, I don't know about you, she and I would argue about this a lot. I would never I wouldn't want the PI to sign a delegation log until all the training was done. But you know how we sit in an SIV and we write everything out, but there's still other trainings to be done? If you have the PI sign the delegation log at the SIV, but there's still training yet to be done, you can't be you don't want that to be the effective date of when the person started. Like Lauren right now, she is delegated everything but MBW and sweat chloride because we haven't done that testing. So I made sure to leave all of that off so that if the inspector comes in and says, okay, she's delegated to those tasks right now, and then when I train her, I'll add those tasks later on, even in a different line, or I'll start over, I'll ask for a text how they want me to do that. But it really is, if you have something that is contradicting what is said, you have to document why it's contradicting. I also do, like I said, the PI oversight with our adverse event reviews, our eligibility confirmation, note to files even. Now, there are some note to files that I don't have the PI always sign, like if it was something that I did that had nothing to do with patient care, safety, deviations, I don't have her do that or him do that. But if it's something that directly, in fact, affects the patient, affects the trial, I'm going to have her sign it. That way she knows there's oversight. And then our meetings, whether it's just an email or documentation of, like if we meet to say we're going to discuss this, our agenda, I have her sign it off. That shows oversight to the FDA. So as the primary coordinator, what can you do? Practice you're in a state of preparedness, like you're always going to be audited, because you will, whether it's by a monitor, an auditor, or an inspector, you're going to be audited. So I say how you do that in compliance with all standards. Your protocol is always number one. Your site SOPs, and then local and federal regulations. Use Alcoa. Every encounter, every single, even a phone note, transparency is key. Ask your backups to double check ICF processes for just, for how your ICF went for discrepancies. I hate it when IRBs make us put page numbers on there, and I also hate it when they make us put a time. So I don't push back always on the time, especially if it's like a device trial and implant, when implanting and whatnot, because you really want to show that they've had time to review the ICF. But sometimes I miss the time, so I'm like, hey, can you just look this over while I'm doing this, because then I can catch the patient before they leave. And ask yourself this: if you won the lottery or get hit by a bus and didn't return to the office, would your coworkers be able to pick up where you left off with success? And I guess that's how I practice. And they're still going to have questions. I left Kootenai with a coordinator who the first year called and asked me some questions because she's like, I don't know why this happened this way. And that's okay, but at least you have a good, you just want to make sure that they can step in when that person is gone. The person that I left in charge of my study when I left Kootenai was brand new to EP, so I realized she was just lacking that electrophysiology knowledge, so that's what she needed a little bit more training on, and I'm just across the border. It was easy for her to call me. 3, checking your work. How many of you guys have studies that don't have monitoring visits? A lot of us, right? A lot of TDN studies. And we learned, we had a big study with a brand new coordinator who was an RN who was 3 years ago dumped into this role without proper mentoring. And that sparked a desire for me to really be vocal at my institution and say, this is not okay. This is how we practiced before. I'm not doing that here. We need to make a change. And so now we have an onboarding where they will now sit with us, and it doesn't matter if you're a nurse, if you have your PhD, you will sit with a research coordinator and you will learn how to be a research coordinator, just because those roles are very different. Monitoring visits help keep trials at sites in a state of audit readiness. It's supposed to. I don't know if you've noticed lately, sometimes we might know more than the monitor, and that's okay. As long as your monitor is willing to learn, you guys can actually make a great team. But what if your trial isn't monitored? And I think that's where some of our problem is, or what happened with our 96 patient study. It was a nightmare, but it taught us a lot. And what we learned is unmonitored trials limits oversight and an opportunity for the coordinator to grow. I remember my colleague saying, you're so lucky. You're so lucky you have monitoring visits. And I went, right. Because she would watch us and be spending the whole day with the monitors, sometimes crying because we know we did it right. What do they want? Or anywho, but she kept saying, you're so lucky, and it made me realize I am lucky, because even though we might have a monitor that doesn't know what they're doing and we're learning together, that sparks conversation, and that sparks how we seeking the information to do it right. So we learned reduced accountability decreases work quality. Not intentionally. This nurse did not want to do poor work. She didn't know what she didn't know. Inconsistent performance equals uneven outcomes. We all know that when we don't do PFTs correctly the same way each time, or an EKG, or we know that it can be, so we're like, we have to, if you're going to do it, one, blood pressure is in the right arm, I document it so that patient gets their blood pressure in the right arm every single time. Sitting position. Am I a little bit anal when it comes to that? Yes, because blood pressures differ from right to left. And it depends on maybe that one day you took it on a different spot using a manual cuff versus an automatic, and it's different. And then it causes a frenzy, and you have a potential AE when you realize, oh, I didn't know, okay, it might not be an AE. I just used this, or the cuff is broken. And then overlooked errors, missed opportunities for improvement. So all these things can lead to potential reportable outcomes. So we decided we're going to do an internal audit of a study that had like 90-some patients in it. It took us a year because I wasn't granted the opportunity to just focus on that. I was still coordinating trials, still mentoring, still doing all my fun stuff that I do on the side. So it did take us a long time, but I focused on, there were 6 things that we focused on. ICF, was the correct version used? Did all appropriate parties sign and date? And in our institution, we have to scan it into the EMR. Was the documentation of informed consent done? Was it signed, filed, and placed where it needed to go? Was the eligibility criteria done and signed by the investigator? ComEd log, was there one? So I know some sites don't use one because they have it in their EMR, but we don't because we have Epic, and Epic has 20,000 people entering meds in there. Ugh. So I'm like, use a ComEd log. It will make your life better. Adverse event and protocol deviation log. Source documents, we found out with this study, this poor gal did not have one source doc for her first 50 patients. It was being directly entered in the EDC. She didn't know. She was trained by our manager, who at the time was checked out, I think. I don't know. She was a great manager. I don't know what happened. Breakdown of communication. All I know is the coordinator was saying, I didn't know to do that. I thought I took my laptop in and entered the data. It was heartbreaking because I said, that's not wrong, but it is for this study. And so I had to point it out to her. I had to go to the protocol, the training, and show her this is what it meant, that you needed to have source for everything that's entered in the EDC. And then documentation of missed visits. People weren't coming in. And I'm like, why are there so many missed visits? Because they didn't come in? Well, why? I thought they would call me to schedule their research visit. No, that's not how research works. So we did some retraining. So through this, these are some of the findings that we found that were related to GCP and ALCOA. That CRC thought direct entry was source. Some studies it is. If you've ever done like an Amgen study or a TIMI study, that is source. I mean, we are doing one right now. It is source. They don't want you to write anything down. But this study, unfortunately, was not. Patient and RC obtaining consent did not sign on the same date. That's okay. I'm like, what happened here? She's like, well, I did a remote consent. Where did you document that? I didn't know that I had to. So we have an SOP about it, so I don't know where that got lost in translation, but we retrained and talked about that. And I said, I just want to know why. I've had to do that. Have you ever dropped off like a consent in a hospital, like your patient's getting a device? This was a post-approval study, but I dropped it off. I'm like, do you want to participate? We're collecting data, blah, blah, blah. Let me think about it. Okay, I'm going to leave it with you. I'll come back and check on you tomorrow. I came back the next day. He was discharged. Where's the consent form? It was signed, and the HUC had sent it down to HIM to get it scanned into the chart, and I hadn't even, so I ran all over the hospital, found it, called them. Do you still want to, yes, I want to participate. I signed it, and then I did a note to file explaining what had happened. It was a good time. And that one I did have my note to file signed by the PI. Sorry. Go back up here. So then protocol deviation report does not contain CAPAs. So at our institution, we're trying to figure out a better word to use for little mini CAPAs, because you know in the IRB log or your when you're saying like, why did this happen and how could you prevent it from happening? We call that mini kappas because every deviation that occurs could potentially, sometimes it's out of your control. Patient just didn't want to do it. Or I had 6-minute hall walk. I got a deviation because somebody stole her leg. I'm not joking. Somebody stole her leg and she could not do the 6-minute hall walk. That was a protocol deviation. That's out of my control. So I'm like, what do I tell the IRB? Because they're like, what are you going to do with this? And so I'm like, the NA, there is nothing I can do. I can't go out and buy her a leg. But no, I said, this wasn't completed. Patient had her leg stolen. And I'm sorry, I know she was laughing, guys. It was really funny. So it is okay to laugh. She was a great patient, one of my best research patients. But I had to say, no, right, not applicable because it wasn't anything on her end or my end. But if a patient doesn't come in because the visit was scheduled late in the window closed, I had to reschedule them, I'm going to put in there what I'm going to do to try to get them to come in. I'm going to schedule them earlier in the visit. I'm going to show them what I can to try to prevent a missed visit or a visit out of window. So this one, though, we had some, like the lab was not obtained due to a confusion by the RC when safety labs were due. So the RC reported the deviation but didn't document how they would prevent recurrence or document the retraining they did. So that was one thing we found. Missed visits. We had a lot of missed visits. And I told her, you need to document why they're missed. And then we need to put it on a log. Then we had some findings related to the delegation log and the PI oversight. Okay. After confirmation was made that the RC did not perform any study-related tasks until after the DO assigned a note to file. So we talked about that earlier. CRC assigned to perform physician required, fix that. Eligibility not signed by investigator. We at our site, PI reviews eligibility. Coordinators review it because we're not going to go out and talk to patients that don't meet criteria. I feel like when we're screening, we're all used to doing that. But then we sit down with our PI, they go through it together. We sometimes might have two. We might have one that the coordinator, we write notes, especially if you're doing like a screening visit that goes on for a month. But at the end, it is ultimately the PI's responsibility. And so I'll bring that to the PI, let them sit down, we'll go through it together, sign and date. If they don't do it the same day because the doctor is actually in the hospital or doing something, then I'll explain that. And I'll talk to my PI, but if I don't see him or her that day to sign it, then I'll make sure in my documentation of informed consent that I write, we met, doctor said, reviewed, blah, blah, blah. And then I might even, to be extra cautious, do a note to file explaining whatever, because I don't want everything in the DIC. It just depends on the day, how I'm feeling that day, on how I'm going to document it. And if the PI wants me definitely to do a note to file, then I will. And if she wants to sign it, so these were some of the things. We found a lot that this could have helped her. All the errors that we found, we knew we need to start making a better onboarding process with whether you're a nurse or non-nurse, you need to be onboarded appropriately. So we have a self-audit checklist. And then put my buddy badge here. I don't know if you guys use this. It's a name badge. And at the bottom of it says research. I have the link. I just couldn't add it last night to where you can find this. We have all of our coordinators wear these. It's nice. It lets staff in the hospital know that we're research. Because sometimes, I don't know if you guys are ever walking down the hall and they're like, come in here and help me. And I'm like, I'm not a nurse. I can't do that. But I can hold things for you and get towels for you. But when they see research, then they know who we are. Oh, you have a trial? Can we talk to you about this? Can we talk to you about that? Oh, we actually have a research patient on the floor. They were asking questions. So we like to be identified. ACT. Our last one's ACT. Or maybe it's our fourth one. I can't remember. Sorry. Training. We love training. Not only, we train in research anyways, but we actually do a lot of training at our site every year. Our annual reviews, we actually sit down and look at our SOPs. And then I pick out maybe 4 or 5 test questions because we do our SOPs and our test questions in red cap. And so we can send the attestation to the staff. They can sign that they reviewed it. But how many of you guys say you did it? And it's just like all of our annual health stream. You just click through it and move on. Well, some of these I want our coworkers to look at because I hate sitting in a room when they're like, I didn't know that was an SOP. And I'm like, but you signed the attestation. I'm guilty of that too. I assign the really important SOPs. We assign questions so that it makes us slow down in that moment. Oh, we have to do this. Okay, so they actually, is there true or false? If you guys want to institute that, it's really easy if you have Red Cap. We do lunch and learns, audits and ICF process. We do role playing every other week. We do Thursdays at 2 huddles dedicated to just learning research stuff. This was implemented 2 years ago when I was mentoring 4 people at once. I realized they all had the same questions. So I'm like, let's do this and we can all meet. And then even the research coordinators that have been there 2 years longer, they had a lot of questions because they had never, oh, I didn't know that you guys do that in device trials. I didn't know you did that in drug trials. And then we have a good time reviewing FDA warning letters. And you could turn this into a drinking game after hours, I'm telling you. So our mock audits, we love role playing, and we like to divide into teams. One's the auditor, one's the research team. We ask questions that we're not supposed to ask, and we also act like what would you really do if this is how I learned you're not supposed to invite them in for tea, and you're not supposed to give them coffee. Like when the monitor comes in, I'm like, this is our coffee station, make yourself at home. You're not supposed to do that with the FDA, apparently. Allow teams to engage in active role playing. It really does help break you out of your, we're all a little bit shy at first. My first picture of this was her being scared and everybody looking mean. I'm like, no, this shouldn't be scary. And role playing is, while we are embarrassed in the beginning, trust me, after a couple of times, you're going to be fine. You just really want to know what it feels like when this happens. And if you've never had it happen, you might as well. The role playing will help. We'll even have somebody come in and nobody knows who that person is, so that there's a little bit of, who is that person? Okay, we're going to act like he's the FDA inspector. We don't know him. Okay, so that it kind of gives it a sense of realness. And then encourage active participation and real-time problem solving. This is how I learned when I told somebody, the question was asked to me, why wasn't this done? And my answer, I didn't have time. And they said, you don't ever say you don't have time. I'm like, but that's the truth. No, you'll just say, I'm not sure why that wasn't done. Let me go see what I can find out, like why it wasn't done. This is our FDA warning letter. This is actually my team. We're sitting around looking at warning letters. I didn't want to put anybody on blast, but I did go to the FDA site to show some recent ones. There probably is newer ones, but this one is just as recent as last month. And these are all related to research, consenting, and visits, and documentation. So I really encourage you to go and check them out if you don't. I mean, is anybody here actively looking at the FDA warning letter site? Right? Thank you. I know. I'm a nerd. I love it. And my regulatory specialist who actually taught me regulatory, she's put this in us because this really, you can go in there, read them and learn, oh, they're not doing it. I mean, we got a 483, our doctor did. And it was a learning process. So I think they're very valuable if you've never been through one. Topics for Thursdays at 2, we have a research office hours, like every center probably does, like open hours, just ask questions. We replay conference material. I don't know, we go to Magi and ACRP every year, and they have great learning opportunities. So we will we'll go through and see what we like, and we'll replay them for the whole staff. We go through CRC responsibilities and regulatory, our EPIC research updates, GCP document review, and then our CTMS VELOS updates. That's what we review. And then here we have learning is fun. We try to make it fun. We have candy because everybody will come to have the meeting if there's candy. Final checklist for sites, be proactive. Shift from if the FDA comes to when they come, because they're going to come. They will come. Foster an open environment where discussions can be had to learn from one another. I felt like when I came to research, I found my people. I never have ever felt like I was in trouble when I've done something wrong. I don't want to say the word bad, but when I've done something, I am the first person. Yesterday, I did something wrong. And I spent the whole day trying to correct it. And I'm the first person that will run down the hallway screaming, I did this, don't do it. Don't learn from me. I am not shy about my mistakes. I think that's what I love about this job. Speak up. I've never been in trouble for it. I've been embarrassed and I've been mortified. And I'm like, I hope my PI doesn't think I'm an idiot. But we're all human beings. I also learned very early on from the FDA, we're going to make mistakes. We're human. If you have a trial with no protocol deviations, you're hiding something. Have a dedicated team committed to educating staff. I have a passion for doing this. I don't know why. People ask me why I want to do this. I think because I love this job. I love being a coordinator. I don't want to see people leave. It's hard to find good coordinators. And I know that we have valuable coordinators at our site. So when they think about leaving, I'm like, let's talk about why. And when they say I can't do this job, yes, you can. Because if I can do it, you can do it. It is hard, but it's fun and it's rewarding, and the benefits that we see from patients and even, our colleagues. I love it. Know your super users. And what I mean by that, who is your Velos person? Who knows about documentation? Who knows about how to enter the Epic charts? Who knows? Lauren's our Epic guru. I like Velos. I'm really not sure why, but I like it. I like to enter our data or our CTMS because I hate patients getting billed when they shouldn't be getting billed. Seek out managers, supervisors, leads. Seek out education opportunities for your whole team and encourage your sites to pay for that. It is this job. It's hard to find. It's not hard to find opportunities to learn, but I feel like everything costs. So I do know that there's a lot of free stuff out there, but it really is important to, if you're if you have a good research team, coordinators, invest in them. Your return is going to be 100%. I promise it's going to be great. Don't be afraid to ask questions because you don't know what you don't know. I did something for the first time in 15 years yesterday. I've been a device trial guru forever, done a couple, I've dabbled obviously in drug studies, but you don't know what you don't know. And then my resources, ACRP, I'm a member of ACRP. That's where I get a lot of my research training opportunities. I love Magi. Have you guys ever been to a Magi conference? No. Okay. I highly recommend you go to one, even if it's online, Magi at Home. Outstanding. A lot of this has a lot of like regulatory teaching, FDA, learning about billing compliance. Even if you have people in your own site doing that, good clinical practice inquiries with the FDA. I love this. Did you guys know that there's a site at the FDA that you can go look at people asking questions and the FDA responding? Yeah, I love it. So they go back to late 2000s. I'm a nerd when it comes. I love it. Also, I love to prove people wrong when they're like, when the monitor says, no, that's a regulation. I'm like, is it? I'm gonna go back and look. So I go back. I love this. I'm not trying to be snarky, but guys, I didn't know about this until I went to ACRP. 2018, ACRP, the FDA person told me about this. So I have a bookmark. I tell all my coordinators about it. There's links here. I don't know if you can hit the link. Okay, perfect. And then our team, this is our regulatory team. They help us with everything regulatory related. Since I've taken over for Joan, we get a lot of questions from our CF doctors about regulatory stuff that I can't answer. Because not only do we have our own internal IRB, but then our external, I know external like the back of my hand. Internal, I do not. So we rely on them. This was their most recent walk. This is a part of this is both research and our CF team, medical team. And then this is our lovely PI, Dr. Lambert. She's our director of our adult team, and she's here today. And I just really am so very grateful to have, I didn't work with PIs like this where I came from. So I just feel very fortunate to be a part of this organization and this team, and to obviously be up here talking about FDA to you guys. Well, my favorite quote, this is sitting in my office. If we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. So that's it. 20 minutes.
Please feel free to contact to the microphone if you have any question, please. Remember, we are coming. And then you can have any other question.
Okay, it's flashing at us. Yeah, did you hear about the questions? You can go in the app and put questions in, but we have one more presenter for FDA audits, and then we'll talk about FDA questions after that. So our next speaker is Kristen Packer from the University of Utah. Her site covers a large geographical area where her patients can come from a 300-mile radius. They see both adults and peds patients as a research team. And she has been doing CF research for 21 years at her center. And then in her off time, she loves spending time with her family, friends, 2 beagles, running and hiking. Welcome, Kristen.
Okay, thank you everybody for the opportunity to speak. I am going to talk about our experience with FDA audits. So Kelly gave a lot of background about how they prepare and what happens, and mine is going to be more of like a case study presentation of what happens when they get there. I have no relationships to disclose. And like Kelly said, there are different types of audits. Some that are the manufacturing process, for cause, follow-up inspections, if you've had previous violations. And then what I'll be talking about are application-based inspections or not-for-cause audits. So these are done when usually a drug company or a device company submits for a new application. And the FDA conducts audits for about 20% of those, and it's just a regular part of the process of the NDA to verify that data are accurate and complete. The inspections are to verify the reliability, integrity, and compliance of what has been submitted for review and approval. So sites are selected for audit based on a number of things. It can be the number of subjects, type of subjects, any inspectional history, any data irregularities or outliers, the rate of enrollment versus other sites, the PI's experience, and any relevant financial disclosures. So what is the FDA auditor looking for? The FDA is there to audit the PI for a particular protocol that has been submitted for the NDA. The auditor can also look at other data or open a larger investigation if there are concerns. They are verifying that patient safety was maintained and data integrity, and that the PI has collected research data appropriately. So what determines the length of an audit? Ours have all been a full work week, a Monday through Friday. But we asked the auditor what determines the length of it, and he said it can be the complexity of the study, number of subjects enrolled, organization of study records, and site cooperation. So they can extend it if they feel the need. So in addition to our records, what else happened in our preparation? We had minimal notice, so less than a week for 2 of the 4 audits. We notified the clinical team, research team, sub-Is, delegated personnel, IRB, OSP, pharmacy, and any other departments involved in each study. Each auditor presented a 482 and their badge at the time of arrival, and we had to sign off that we acknowledge receipt of it. We designated 1 individual to be the main contact. And the auditor was set up in a designated space with signage that an FDA audit was occurring. They were shown where the restroom and the water were located and given contact information. But like Kelly said, we weren't like, here's tea, here's coffee, let's take you to lunch. Just kind of, here's the basics of what you need to know. So our first audit was in January of 2008. This was a not-for-cause audit due to being a high-enrolling site. It was a sponsored clinical trial for a pancreatic enzyme, and the sponsor headquarters were in Canada. We received notice from the sponsor in December that it was likely we'd be selected for an FDA audit. And a little bit of background, I was the lead RC for this and just left on maternity leave. So Judy called me and said, I'm not trying to make you go into labor, but the FDA is coming. So that was great. But the FDA audits are very time consuming. And like Kelly said, they take complete priority over all other work. So in addition to my being gone, they had to cover a sponsor audit and the FDA audit, which was a lot of time. We were the first group to receive an FDA audit at our institution as far as we were able to learn. So we had no guidance, no previous experience, no institutional support, like no SOP. We wish we could have had a Kelly to call to help us get ready, but we were just like, I mean, we'll just figure it out as we go, I guess. It's kind of what happened. The sponsor came for an extensive pre-audit review, which was completely unhelpful and created confusion. Jane remembers papers just like flying. They were just crazed going through everything. So in this particular study, the sponsor had given us waivers and exceptions for inclusion-exclusion when study fecal elastase results were not received in time, like it had to have been received this amount of time before. And so they kept giving us waivers. And we thought, it's their protocol, okay. So paper CRFs were used and all medical records were paper. So there's a lot of paper. There were no source worksheets provided. Source documents were original documentation of data, but a photocopy of the paper CRFs were used to make the source worksheets. And the sponsor was all up in arms about that. And then as we followed up through the regulatory and even asked other auditors and monitors, that was not a problem. You can't make a copy of a completed CRF and say it's sourced, but a blank copy used as a worksheet is not a problem. What they should have been concerned with was the waivers. So our key takeaways were an FDA audit is an audit of the site PI with emphasis on a certain protocol. If there are concerns, the auditor can open a larger study and look at other data. The PI is 100% responsible for the protocol at the site. The sponsor does not dictate or allow waivers or exceptions. Any deviation or variation from the protocol is a protocol deviation. So if there's something in the protocol that your site will not be able to do or will cause difficulty, you may not want to be able to do the study if you can't do it properly. You want to set your site up for success. And like Kelly said, you don't know what you don't know. So every opportunity to learn is good. So we got to the end of the audit. The auditor met daily with the PI to review findings and discuss areas of concern. The final meeting on the last day of the audit happened, and we were, yay, we survived an audit. The letter with the summary of findings was received later. There was no 483. And then 5 months later, the FDA had knocked again. So this was May 2008, a not-for-cause audit again, due to being a high-enrolling site, sponsored clinical trial for an inhaled antibiotic. For this study, we had extensive monitoring, and she was fabulous. I learned so much from her. She would come and spend like a whole week, and we had paper records, paper medical charts, and she would go through every single one. We just had piles and piles of medical records that she did 100% source verification. But I learned so much from her. So this one, I received a phone call on a Thursday from the FDA to notify us of an audit. The PI and the rest of the team were all at a conference and out of cell phone range at that particular moment. So I left several frantic messages. They all sounded something like, please, somebody call me back. The FDA is coming. Anybody call me back. And so another funny part of that was she called and said, I'm calling to see if Monday would work for an FDA audit. And I was like, I mean, if the next week is good. And she's like, no, I'm really telling you that I will be there on Monday. I was like, okay, Monday's great. Monday's perfect. So after my initial panic, we determined we had just done it months ago and we would do it again. So ins and outs of this study, the auditor was set up in a multi-use conference room with signage that an FDA audit was ongoing. She was quiet, only asked to be shown records, and did not ask many questions. On the final day, at the final meeting, to wrap up the audit, Judy noticed she seemed upset. She was kind of red and like agitated. The auditor related that she had overheard a conversation when others came in the conference room, and we'll call him Dr. Duh. A physician unrelated to the study made an offhanded comment about knowing someone at the VA who could get around the IRB. And she said if he had named any names or said any specifics, she would have opened an entire institutional investigation. So we narrowly escaped a situation there. But we did not receive a 483, just a letter of findings again. So key takeaways: ensure the space for the auditor is completely private, with no other personnel around, nobody making offhanded comments, no other records around, just the auditor and what they've asked for, bringing that one at a time. A good monitor makes a huge difference. We knew our data had been thoroughly reviewed and issues had been addressed. And then what we learned from having 2 audits in that short amount of time is just how much time they take, and started including an FDA audit line item in sponsor budgets to help with that. So then 2 years later, 3rd audit. We had another not-for-cause audit. It was a sponsored clinical trial for another pancreatic enzyme. This one was a pediatric-only study, and the lead RC no longer worked with us. So Jane took the lead. She was handling all of the data that she hadn't done. So you might be required to be responsible for an audit when you did not do the study. We did have an external audit by the sponsor again, and this one again was unhelpful. 2 auditors came, never asked questions, made a huge list of findings, none of which were correct, left early without communicating, skipped a meeting with pharmacy, and claimed that one hadn't been scheduled, which was untrue. So our experience of the sponsor audits has not been good. We have not really found those helpful. So this one he was incredibly official, educational, and thorough. And he was from a department of the Coast Guard and came in full dress uniform every day, like head to toe, hat, everything. And his name was Lieutenant Dan. So, no joke. Lieutenant Dan wanted to visit every location, pharmacy, IRB, hospitals, clinics, office spaces. So he and Jane crisscrossed across campus, going back and forth to all the different areas, and he would quiz Jane every walk on how she would do things, how she would handle things, if things that he had seen somewhere else seemed scattered, what would Jane do differently? And he stated a 483 is titled an inspectional observations, and every auditor should provide one, which he did. And all you do is you get the letter, you respond to it with how you're going to correct those issues. Case closed as long as you're responsive. So key takeaways from Lieutenant Dan. It is critically important to know how your site operates. Follow GCP, have up-to-date training. If you have SOPs, know where they are and what they say. If you do have SOPs and you don't follow them, that in and of itself is a finding. If you are asked questions and you don't know the answer, do not ad lib, state that you'll find the answer and come back. Be honest. So more lessons from Lieutenant Dan. Like I said, he was very educational and thorough. The audit is not a random search through records looking for mistakes. There are specific items the auditor is looking for that guides the inspection. And they use the study records to make a determination as to whether or not these have been met. So what is this information that guides the audit? It is the 1572 Investigator Agreement. So on the back, it's not just another regulatory document to get signed. Section 9 is called the commitments. So I know it's lengthy, but I agree to conduct the study in accordance with the relevant current protocol. We'll only make changes in a protocol after notifying the sponsor, except when necessary to protect the safety, rights, or welfare of subjects. I agree to personally conduct or supervise the described investigation. I agree to inform any patients or any persons used as controls that the drugs are being used for investigational purposes, and will ensure that the requirements of informed consent and institutional review board are met. I agree to report to the sponsor adverse experiences that occur in the course of the investigation, and I have read and understand the information in the investigator brochure, including potential risks and side effects. And then another one, I agree to ensure all associates, colleagues, and employees assisting in the conduct of studies are informed of their obligations. I agree to maintain adequate and accurate records and ensure that IRB complies with requirements, and all other changes and unanticipated problems will be reported. I agree to comply with all other requirements regarding the obligations and pertinent requirements. So I kind of glossed over those, but these are really important. And Lieutenant Dan said this is basically his checklist that he's working through as he's reviewing data. How did the data represent that this was met and that the investigator showed appropriate oversight? So several years later, audit number 4. So another not-for-cause audit due to being a high-enrolling site, sponsored clinical trial for a CFTR modulator. This was for 12 years and older, and we enrolled both adult and pediatric patients. And until last month, our pediatric EMR and adult EMR were on 2 separate systems, and the auditor specifically asked me to demonstrate with him on my computer how I could access both, log in, find the patients, and show that I knew how to find genotype, medical records, clinic notes, and other things for inclusion/exclusion. So during this study, we noticed several ongoing issues with our research pharmacy, both for this particular study and for others. There were documentation errors, wrong kits pulled or incorrectly labeled, And we contacted the research pharmacy and were told repeatedly by the lead pharmacist, don't worry, everything's being taken care of, we'll fix it, it's not a big deal. But they kept happening. So we notified the IRB of our concerns, and we weren't really getting anywhere on solving the issue. So Dr. Lill, our PI, contacted the head of the university pharmacy, whom he knew, and raised the concerns. This resulted in several meetings with process changes and personnel changes. So even though it was a different area, the PI is still responsible for all site activity, and he had to step in to make some corrective actions. So for this last audit, number 4, we scheduled a conference room in our new medical education building, far away from other personnel. He met daily with the PI. We had one contact person who brought only the requested records and answered questions, so one contact person. We set up specific times to check back in or to bring the next binder and ensured he had contact information. Dr. Lill was scheduled this week on the Friday to go to an investigator meeting for the same sponsor whose study was being monitored. So it seemed pretty difficult to determine if he should cancel the trip, stay and do the last day of the audit, or show PI oversight and training by going. So he discussed it with the auditor, and by Thursday there were no significant findings, and he decided to go ahead with the trip. So we had another person come from internal medicine to take documentation and do the closeout with them. So that's always an option, either a PI, if the PI can't be available, a sub-I, or another person to fill in. So we had no 483 again, just another summary of findings. And be prepared to answer questions about how or why something was reported. Be able to find the medical record data used for inclusion/exclusion. Know your weak link, like our pharmacy issue, or anything that was problematic, mistakes, repeated errors, and how these were addressed, and what retraining was done. Ensure documents are signed in a timely manner. And then, so that was our experience over about a decade of 4 different audits. And how have things changed, like at our site or kind of just in the research field? The process for viewing study records and medical records have changed from our earliest ones where we had piles and piles and stacks of records to everything being electronic. Sometimes sources electronic, sometimes paper, but all of our medical records are electronic. Several departments at our hospital have gone to completely remote, like our IRB or OSP, so the Lieutenant Dan would not be able to walk across campus to find those areas. Our pharmacy records are electronic. There's no outside access permitted in the pharmacy space without a Utah pharmacy license. So again, nobody could go in there. Many sites use electronic regulatory and central IRBs. So all of those still fall under the PI's jurisdiction of having to be in control of that. Excuse me. So like Kelly said, there are 2 foundational elements that all of the auditors looked through and spent a lot of time on. And those were consent and eligibility. So consent would be the correct version, all pages are complete, the process was documented, and that it was done before any study procedures. Then eligibility, the inclusion/exclusion were reviewed, they were met with appropriate documentation in the source. So these are the 2 foundational elements for enrolling somebody properly in a study. And if you kind of mess that up, then the whole rest of the data is questionable. So all of our auditors spent a lot of time on those. So our overall experiences, the auditors were professional, courteous, and were there to look at research data to make a judgment on the ability of the PI to manage the study with data integrity and patient safety being the 2 criteria. They audited particular study information to determine if data supported the FDA approval for the new drug. They asked clarifying questions if they could not locate something or wanted more detail, and they were not out to get us. We were told there should be findings or they would suspect false data or covering up things, like Kelly said. We learned so much from the experience of having the audits. And the research world is just constantly changing. We don't know what we don't know, so continuing to learn is critical, and things change from year to year, from study to study, everything's different. Your goal is to provide quality data that is an honest reflection of the study. Good data and study management ultimately help the CF cause and moving research and therapies forward. So I want to say thank you for the opportunity and for my research team. And we have been together for a very long time. So this group of us 5 here have been together for 21 years, and Alice is our new person at like almost 9 years. So we've been together for a long time. And then go to questions.
All the information you get very good, my mind. I don't have any question. Well, I have a question here for the app. I don't know who wants to answer, but they say, could you please specify the website be available to view like a guideline for FDA? I imagine for the view letters or? Yes.
Are you talking about the website?
Hello. Okay. So, sorry. Are you talking about the website for the inquiries, the GCP inquiries? What was it? Oh, they don't specify. Okay. So there's 2 different links that I put up there. GCP requirements, there's 2 links. One was from 2024. If you go in there and click on it, you're going to be prompted to download a Excel spreadsheet. I love that they did this. And the reason why, if you have something very specific that you want, a GCP question, an ICF question, protocol deviation, all you have to do is go up on the top of the Excel spreadsheet, type that in, and it'll actually narrow in on those specific. Prior to that, you actually have emails that you have to sort through. But fortunately, the FDA broke it up between all the different like ICF, GCP, protocol, training. At least they broke it up that way. But when you click into that year, you're going to get bombarded with so many emails. And what they do is they really encourage you to ask that. They have an email up there. You can go in and ask your question and they will respond. And when those earlier emails, they redacted everything. So nobody knew who the site was asking the question. And a lot of times they couldn't answer it. They would say, defer to your local your IRB, your policy, or that's not a regulation, but this is good practice. So I do encourage going on there and playing around with that and just seeing different things. Of course, things have changed over the last year. So like the common rule, you're going to see the difference between before and after. But if you're up one late night, I would take a look at it. I like it.
Okay, it's coming another question. The phrase for cause audit, is this specific to the site being suspect or something? Or can it be labeled as cause of audit when you are hiring and enrolling site, when the sponsor is suspect or something suspicious?
A for-cause audit, is that on? Yeah. Okay. A for-cause audit can be triggered by, yes, like a report from the sponsor that something is amiss. It can be even triggered by like a disgruntled employee if they make a report to the FDA. Really, it's just any information that they've received that there could be a potential problem can trigger it.
I can answer. Ours was a for cause. And I say ours because this is our institution. It definitely was a for cause audit. I don't want to name names, but I think it came from the sponsor during a monitoring visit and an audit visit. There were some findings, and that's what this was a device that to this day is used. I don't know how the word I would want to use. Like it needed to be done, and we were issued a 483. This inspection lasted 3 years, but it really brought to light the processes back then and how bad they were. Screening consents, I'm not a big fan of them. Our findings were not safety in a sense of you had a screening consent, patient signed the screening consent, and then before they were enrolled, they passed away and they didn't get in. These were sick papatients, by the way. So I just want you guys to know, talk to me later and I can guide you to where to go look for this warning letter, but a lot of it was like paperwork. It was paperwork. The consent form got signed to start the screening process. If they passed away, it didn't get reported because they had moved on to the next patient. They didn't realize that even though you're in the screening phase, the coordinator didn't know that she needed to report it. Yeah. So, like I said, come find me later. Because it really is a good, I feel bad for the PI. He's a great physician. He's recently retired. He is a great doctor. The coordinator, great coordinator. It just was lack of training and lack of understanding, and having 2 consent forms. I do not like 2 consent forms, and I'll just leave it at that.
All right, I think this will be our last question. Our site is creating an eligibility source documentation review for all greater than minimal risk studies. Managers will review the first 3 patients to ensure all source documentation is present and verifies eligibility criteria have been met and verified by the PI. It also requires consent, assent review, and documentation. Does anyone else have a process like this? Any tips for implementing this process that may be helpful? I think this is great.
So we have our manager, based on some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years, especially with that big audit that we did, she reviews a new, every time we have a new protocol and we have our first patient randomized, we meet, talk about it, and she actually goes through and looks at everything. Even if that study is monitored, she wants to see that that's her only way. I told her, this is the only way you're going to know what your staff is doing. So she implemented that, and she goes through and it sparks a meet. She does one from every coordinator, even myself, because I'm not perfect. And she goes through and looks at everything to make sure that we're all doing our job.
Yeah.
I can speak loud enough. Okay, my question is, what does your clinic do during an FDA audit? Do you shut down completely otherwise while you're doing an FDA audit? Or are you still doing research things on the end while the audit is going on?
So I'll just specify. So our clinic doesn't shut down. Yeah. But research in the first one where it was just the other 2 coordinators and I was out. That was just the whole focus basically. If there are visits that need to be conducted for a time, they would go ahead and be conducted. We wouldn't just cancel and have out of window or anything like that, but we would try to accommodate the auditor as the top priority while still trying to do the other things.
Yeah, that's what we do. They just had one like right before I joined. I think in 2020 we had one. And if patients could be rescheduled, great. If not, fortunately, we have 2 offices. We have the clinical where all the coordinators sit. I call it clinical, but that's not where we see our patients. But all the coordinators sit in this office. That's where our boardroom is. And then we have a space for monitors. And then over in our other tower, we have the regulatory and our directors, and then that's where we actually see patients. We have our lab there where we keep a study IP. So we have the flexibility of keeping those patients that we can't reschedule, but if we can, they want all hands on deck because it's just more to help. Yeah.
Great.
Preparing for a complex clinical trial sometimes feels like a moving through chaos, so many moving parts, regulation, deadlines, unexpected challenges. But our goal today is to move from the chaos to the clarity. Now we have the set to a stage and I'm excited to bring 2 experts who will help us to explore this journey. Our first panelist is Lauren Paquette, who brings 20 years of nursing experience at Boston Children's Hospital. She began her career providing bedside care to adolescents with cystic fibrosis and other complex medical conditions, later specializing in inpatient critical care medicine. For the past 5 years, Lauren has served as a research nurse coordinator in the Pulmonary Research Department, where she integrates her clinical expertise with the research oversight in studies on cystic fibrosis and severe asthma. Also, I would like to bring our second panelist, Messuri-Swan. who received her BA in biology from Westlake College and her BSM from Northeastern University. She has been a clinical research nurse at Boston Children's Hospital since 2016 in both pulmonary medicine and the hospital's clinical translation research unit. Allison currently serves as the site lead RC on multiple trials, as well as providing clinical research nursing support for the pulmonary research group portfolio of study. Allison is current mentee in the TDN Loft RC program and recently present on the TDN 2025 conference in the Clinical Research Bootcamp program, as well as leading a panel discussion for the June 2025 RC Open Forum. Welcome to our panelists, Lauren and Allison.
Okay, so for our talk, we're going to pivot a bit to talk about how RCs can prepare their site for a complex study. However, hopefully, many of our suggestions will continue to help your site live audit ready with thorough and efficient startup processes. This is the NACFC disclaimer. We have no disclosures. Okay, so our objectives. We want to provide tools for sites to manage complex, high-risk research protocols. We want to share best practices to optimize communication and planning. And we want to outline systemic strategies for emergency preparedness.
Okay, so before we formally begin, we just wanted to briefly introduce ourselves and the way that our program is structured. We represent Boston Children's Hospital, or BCH, our pulmonary research team. We're a diverse group of doctors, nurse practitioner, nurses, and other research professionals. Dr. Jonathan Gaffin leads our department as the head of pulmonary research, and 5 physicians, including him, sort of rotate through what we call a doctor of the day, or a DOD. They're assigned each a day of the week, and on that day, they cover the research needs of our unit. And those doctors also serve as the PIs for our studies. Robert Fowler, who's here with Jonathan Greenberg, are our research managers, and they maintain our department's financial and regulatory sectors. And then Monica Eulis is part of our nursing team as a nurse practitioner, but she also manages us. Allison Messuri-Swan, myself, and Julia Giancola are our 3 research nurse coordinators, and we oversee most of our sponsored medication trials and assist with TDN studies. And then to round out our team, we have 2 research coordinators, Alina Brennan and Deja Cunningham. They manage most of our investigator-initiated studies as well as some TDN studies, and we are all supported by 4 research assistants, Elvi Arias, Autumn Cabral, Bella Chuli, and Ethan Ito, and they handle TDN studies, kit preparation, and sample processing. So we wanted to start off with a poll. If you can scan this QR code, hopefully it works. If not, on your table, there should be a page that says poll number 1, and it should bring you to a Microsoft Forms poll question, and it should say, if your site was chosen to enroll in a complex research trial, would you feel comfortable accepting the challenge? And so if you can just respond once, we'll see what people say, and then we'll talk about the answers.
Just give you a minute. All right, so about 53% of you said, we were born ready, let's roll. 43% said, let us think about it, maybe with some trepidation, and only 4% of you said, nope, no way, over our heads, which is great.
So step 1 is really to review your site's ability to carry out any given complex protocol. It's imperative to ensure that your institution's policies and capabilities align with what is being asked of you. So regulatory and compliance alignment
essentially, you want to ask yourself, is this ethical and can we even keep up with this study? So we all know oversight is provided by institutional review boards, IRBs, or ethics committees, and they can operate at a local or a central level. And if you're familiar with local IRBs like ours, they often impose additional ethical and safety requirements, which sometimes when sponsors are in a highly competitive study and they're pushing for very accelerated timelines, that can be kind of challenging. So thinking about that with feasibility and planning project scheduling is important. Clinical infrastructure and resources. Is it legal? And is this even logistically possible for our site? So sponsor rules might not match your institution standards. Legal and IRB review is absolutely critical. A bit later in this presentation, actually, we're going to give an example of when this exact type of conflict happened at our site. So you'll also need to ensure that you have the right infrastructure to carry out a complex trial. Do you have a specialized care unit? Do you have an investigational pharmacy on site? How about emergency equipment or trained staff? In the same breath, staff training and competency. Can you do all the assessments that are needed? The training can be complex. The requirements can be different from what your institution has. And additionally, a lot of smaller and outpatient sites may not have a lot of the tools that some of the inpatient larger facilities have access to. We actually ran into this at our site. We had a study that appeared to be pretty straightforward. We were setting it up to be run in our ambulatory unit until we realized the EKG they wanted was to be done clinically. And unfortunately, our pulmonary clinic doesn't house an EKG machine. So coordinating with the cardiology department proved completely unfeasible given the time points and scheduling restrictions, even for such a large institution like ours. So just something to think about. And then safety monitoring escalation. Is it safe? A lot of protocols won't always spell out emergency procedures. So you want to start thinking about your own clear escalation plans when considering feasibility. That will include thinking about things like monitoring plans, clear pathways for emergencies, and organization of lifetime physician oversight.
So, as we probably all know, sponsors and institutions often have different priorities and obligations, which can lead to conflicts. So there may be budget and financial issues. Institutions may feel that the sponsor's budget doesn't cover all the costs of conducting the study, the staff time, the patient care costs, the overhead. And this includes indirect costs, which sponsors may try to minimize paying. However, most institutions have firm percentages that must be covered. Negotiations over contracts are often drawn out, and there may be disagreements over the type of payments, leading to delays. For study protocol design, institutions might have feasibility concerns when looking at protocol requirements versus operational capabilities. Are the planned study visits too numerous, or the visits themselves too long or taxing? And are the enrollment goals realistic for their patient population? When it comes to eligibility criteria, sponsors may want very strict criteria to minimize their confounding variables, but hospitals may question the ability to successfully enroll. For regulatory and ethical oversight, sponsors may get frustrated by your IRB's requests for protocol clarifications or maybe even changes to the protocol. Sponsors might want specific wording in the informed consent to protect legal interests, which may conflict with IRB standards. Under monitoring and auditing, sponsors may demand frequent on-site monitoring or sponsor audits, which burden site staff. Hospitals may resist giving sponsors full access to patient records or monitors the access to the patient records due to privacy concerns. And while source documentation is, of course, required per GCP, the sponsor-provided logs or source documents are not actually mandatory, so long as the information is recorded and maintained properly per ALCOA. And hopefully, as an RC, someone else will be dealing with these like high-level contracts and budgets, such as your research manager or a regulatory coordinator, if you have one. However, it's important to keep these potential conflicts in mind when working up a complex study. So we have another poll. So again, if you want to scan the QR code on the screen or on your table, it's number 2. And the question is, have you ever had to delay a study start due to sponsor versus institutional conflicts? I'll give you a minute to respond, and Lauren will present our results.
All right, so it looks like we're pretty divided. Some more coming in. Pretty equal between maybe once or twice and yes every time, which is great to hear. Yeah.
Very few nevers.
Very few nevers. 4%. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about SOPs and guidance documents. SOPs are standard operating procedures, and guidelines, they serve distinct but very complementary roles. Both help ensure compliance, consistency, and quality, but they differ very greatly in their authority, flexibility, and level of detail. On the slide here, you can see some keywords above each of the types of documents. And as you can see, SOPs are very rigid, as they talked about before, so much in fact that they are legally binding. If you were to be audited by the FDA or a GCP audit, you will be held accountable to your SOPs. Guidelines, however, are not enforceable. They're more advisory. So you would want to use an SOP when tasks need to be performed the exact same way every time, and a guideline, on the other hand, if you need some flexibility. So if, say, you're using the same document across different departments or for different studies, and it might need to be tweaked ever so slightly, a guideline would be more appropriate. SOPs are also very highly specific. They contain mandatory steps, roles, timelines, and they're all spelled out. Guidelines tend to be more broad and forgiving, so an SOP would be appropriate if there are regulatory implications like we were talking about before, or if you're training new staff and you want consistency across the board. A guideline, on the other hand, would be appropriate if there's any type of room for professional judgment within any kind of task. And then finally, SOPs have to be followed as written. There is no wavering from that. Guidelines can be flexible, though, and adapted based on context and clinical judgment, like we said. So SOPs would be ideal for auditable or high-risk tasks like drug handling or consent process, whereas guidelines would best serve you when you are advising on, say, something like a best practice or a new approach to something. So in full transparency, you're going to hate this. We don't use a ton of SOPs at our site, in our department, I should say. But an example of one that we did need to create is our nebulizer disinfection SOP. This is the example that I alluded to earlier, where when you're thinking about site feasibility, there's the potential for sponsor and institutional rules to differ. And so in this instance, essentially the protocol semantics kind of became an institutional roadblock for us when carrying out trials that required nebulizer sterilization. So to give a little background, at BCH, we're kind of in unique positioning because our site's enrolling in multiple nucleic acid-based therapies or NABT trials simultaneously. All of them have different requirements for sterilizing the nebulizers that they use. But the one commonality really is that they seem to be asking to use baby bottle sterilizers. Well, at Children's, we're very, very stringent. We exceed even CFF guidelines in the sense that our institution considers a baby bottle sterilizer to be a method of disinfection and absolutely not sterilization. So, due to the semantics of the protocol and the restrictions of our institution, we needed to find clarity on how we could make this work. So our team developed a very detailed SOP aligned with hospital protocols to ensure that full compliance would be met. This SOP was reviewed and approved by biosafety, pharmacy, institutional teams, many institutional teams after a rigorous review. And the result was a beautiful standardized SOP that we have put into practice on our team. Essentially, only this children's hospital approved SOP can be used when patients or subjects come to us and have a visit in the hospital, and we're required to sterilize a nebulizer. However, when they go home, we say, follow the protocol. Do whatever you want to do. So it's slightly different there. To aid in carrying this out effectively, we provided some staff support documents like you can see up here. We are a pediatric institution, which is why we use some fun graphics. But just some door hangers that we made and some stickers and things for bags and such used during the disinfection process.
So when you're starting up a complex study, it's extremely important to identify all your players. So beyond your immediate team of PIs, sub-Is, coordinators, at the very least, you'll likely be involving your investigational pharmacy and team members with the ability to process and ship out samples. With a complex study, you'll also potentially be involving outside departments such as radiology for imaging, audiology or ophthalmology to establish baselines and monitor for adverse reactions. So mapping out different team responsibilities can be very helpful here. Who's taking care of your site startup? Is that the same person that's dealing with the regulatory pieces? Who will be receiving and maintaining your supplies? Who is in charge of recruitment? Which team member will be present in the visit versus processing and shipping the samples? Or is this the same person? Who will be on call if issues come up on evenings or weekends, especially given the potential for high acuity situations here? Identifying all of these different responsibilities up front can help prevent a lot of confusion and headaches down the line. You'll also want to identify your avenues of communication long before you have that first subject and need to schedule your CT scan ASAP. Different departments might have different requirements as far as scheduling and timelines, so it's essential to establish those expectations at the start of the study. So along with knowing your team and the ancillary support players, you really need to know your PI. Ultimately, your PI is responsible for the trial and all of the study conduct. That's why they are the primary investigator and why they sign off on the delegation of authority. However, every PI has different levels of conflicting responsibilities. They may have various clinical roles, including CF Center Director, Head of Outpatient Clinic, on-call duties. And even if they're able to primarily focus on research, they may be the PI of multiple studies or even the only PI at your center. Personally, your PI may prefer to be more or less hands-on, whether in regard to planning the study, recruitment of study participants, or the day-to-day management of the trial. It's important to establish patterns of communication and workflow with your PI before the study starts. At bare minimum, what's the best way to get in touch with them? Beyond that, do they prefer daily or weekly updates on the study progress? Will they need to be available for every single study visit? Will they be consenting the participant at screening? Are they the only provider responsible for the late visit coverage or being on call overnight or on weekends? So, time for a poll.
Okay, so we have another poll. This one's number 3. If you scan it, the question should read, do you frequently meet with your PI and ancillary teams before starting a complex study? And we're referring to meeting as sort of in a formal capacity. So if you can answer that. Oh, wow. Oh, I thought this was yeah.
All right, so yeah, it looks like most of you, so 56% meet multiple times before starting up a study, which makes sense. About 29% said we meet but only once or twice. 13% said that we do not meet with any ancillary teams. And the very small one person said they haven't had complex studies yet. So, at our institution, and probably many of yours, we tend to have numerous multidisciplinary meetings during study startup. We meet with the Clinical Research Organization, NIT, during the building of our electronic orders for Epic. We present to inpatient units to familiarize their staff if we'll be recruiting or conducting study visits on their units. We have implementation meetings with our research unit and our IDS pharmacy to plan for how study visits are going to run. And for complex studies, we also typically conduct dry runs for day one visits to work out where the sticking points might be and what potential delays might come up on that first day. The goal here is to establish these open avenues of communication up front, helping things to run more smoothly once the first patient actually enrolls. So this is also a great time to reach out to other teams within your institution that may have dealt with complex studies before. Every institution is unique, but there's no need to reinvent the wheel for every study. We've even discussed starting a working group at our institution for teams that are conducting gene therapy studies in order to share information about resources for different teams that might not know that these exist. Also, closed loop communication where there's dynamic communication back and forth with the senders and receivers of information, is extremely important when dealing with complex studies. This type of communication might be new to some team members, so it's important to educate and set this standard during startup. Your PEP skills, such as chunk and check and feedback communication loops, are very helpful in many aspects of coordinating these complex trials. Whether you're mapping out your team responsibilities or discussing a high acuity study with your potential participants. Referral participants are extremely common in this type of study, which adds a whole other layer to your communication needs. You'll likely need to coordinate with a whole new team of individuals at the participant's home site and CF Care Center, as well as maintaining excellent communication with the participant themselves.
So systematic preparation is really critical for a successful protocol execution. In general, our team will first review protocols closely for high-risk elements like eligibility, dosing, and adverse event triggers. Next, we create a bunch of resources for our staff, like visit-specific cheat sheets, and we actually make them and print them and put them at the beginning of our source for each visit. So in case you're out, someone else can come in and easily feel confident. Resource binders, and then even study door hangers. And you can look on your table. We printed an example, and we brought one. This is what it would actually look like in real life in our clinic. They're laminated so that for infection control, we can clean them. We do design them with the study logo or whatever, something pretty and cute. And we have them facing on the outside of the door where you're performing your clinic visit. So then whoever is coming, in our case, we have that DOD system. So it's not always your PI that's coming in. It might be one of our sub-Is. And even if it is your PI and they're coming in from a very busy clinic day and they don't always have all of the details in the forefront of their mind of your study, they can easily just flip it over, see some of the key points, especially things like what's blinded, as a brief reminder before you walk in the room. And then so everyone can feel confident when they walk in, knowing what they're walking into. And then finally, we do establish contingency plans, and that includes emergency response plans, tailored electronic order sets. We do use Epic at our institution, and we create those order sets to handle the visit assessments as well as high-risk scenarios. But be warned, there's a very big, often, time gap between when you start getting these documents and creating all of these resources to when you actually start recruiting for patients to come in. So do your diligence and think ahead to organize some review sessions prior to recruitment to ensure that everything you're working with and that you've created is, in fact, up to date.
So deconstructing the protocol thoroughly is a critical process, especially at large institutions such as ours. Subject safety, workflow alignment, and compliance all depend on how well the protocol's details are translated into real-world clinical action. So creating visual cues, such as color coding your copy of the protocol, can be very useful when identifying crucial information around procedures or restrictions. Everything related to procedures is highlighted pink, while everything medical history requirements, things like that, are highlighted yellow. Most protocols provide charts for your schedule of assessments. You'll want to review these in detail to map out all visit level procedures, estimate the length and complexity of your visits, and highlight any special requirements or restrictions. The footnotes often contain crucial stipulations that may not be mentioned or spelled out elsewhere in the protocol. Information from this protocol review will be utilized to structure your study-specific treatment plans, orders within Epic at our institution, and multiple teams have input on these orders. And with us, we make sure they all have access to the protocol as well as study manuals, lab manuals, pharmacy manuals, in order to double check these and validate our orders. The study team does take the lead in this process, and therefore you should know the protocol the best. We also use this in creation of our aforementioned cheat sheets and the door hangers. Okay, so last topic is safety and risk mitigation. So, as you all know, emergency situations can happen any moment when dealing with real human participants in clinical research visits. Someone could pass out during a blood draw, have some low blood sugar, but complex studies present an even greater risk of high acuity situations, such as hemoptysis after a new inhaled therapy, or a delayed adverse reaction to a new study drug, like a high fever hours after the drug administration. We want to plan for these situations in advance to reduce anxiety around potential events, as well as improve our response time and communication during the high acuity events. So it's very important to evaluate where your study visits are going to take place and who will be present or available during a potential high acuity event. Will you be in a research unit staffed with licensed personnel at all hours? Is there potential for any late evening, overnight, or weekend visits for a study? At our site, we are able to conduct most of our study visits in a pulmonary clinic, but it presents some unique challenges. We have limited licensed staff at certain times of day, and our locations can create challenges for timing of an emergency response. So even though we're an outpatient clinic, we're located in the main hospital, and so we call a code blue for a medical emergency. Licensed staff are required to complete all sorts of safety training, such as CPR or PALS, through the hospital, but most of our research staff are non-licensed and not required to complete any of this type of training. So as part of the LOFT RC program, I completed a project to evaluate our current safety knowledge among the unlicensed staff to assess what we might need to train on, because I don't know what they don't know. So then we completed targeted safety training, including what does our staff assist button really mean, the location of important equipment such as the AED, the code cart, and the hazardous drug spill kit, and how to call a code. I also created signage for inside our research participant rooms, indicating which staff was present during the visit, as well as which provider was available to come that day as needed. We added some simple instructions for calling a code, including the exact location where you are, and a card, and with that card, it's sort of directly above our phone, our landlines in the room. Our door hangers that we talked about earlier are also helpful in emergencies, as they include some study basics, which might be confused or forgotten in a really stressful high acuity situation. This is also a great time to evaluate whether you have a crisis communication plan or if this needs to be updated for your current studies. Okay. Our last brief poll. So as you guys have done, scan the code, and then Lauren will present. So this question is, does your site conduct any mock drills for high-risk scenarios?
Usually that's cool. Yeah, so this is actually interesting. I anticipated a lot of people would say never. Only 64%, 29 of you said occasionally on an as-needed basis, which is awesome. And then 8% said yes every time, which is cool. So I, as we mentioned earlier, come from inpatient nursing. So my crux of my career, we routinely performed mock codes and emergency drills to sort of help build the muscle memory and improve our response times in those type of situations. Although our department does strive to conduct dry runs sort of more for timing and coordination purposes, we don't currently practice formal emergency simulation drills. Instead, it's sort of something we've been in talks of maybe starting to develop for our team. So as Allison mentioned earlier, in order to achieve that rapid response, you really do need to know who to call for, what to ask for, and where you are. For example, at our institution, when you're calling for a code blue, if you are inpatient versus outpatient, there's slightly different verbiage that they ask for you to use. So understanding nuances like that are critical. And then practice certainly does make progress. And so we believe this technique could potentially be applied to research trials by conducting mock worst case scenarios. For example, what would you do if your patient just decided to have a mass hemoptysis here? Or what happened if they passed out? How would we react as a team? And so we could include, we envision including nurses, physicians, ancillary teams, anything that would be sort of appropriate. And then gathering kind of like we do on the inpatient side afterwards, debrief and sort of rework the workflow together as a team.
All right, so our key takeaways are aligning your protocol execution with your site capabilities.
Build strong multidisciplinary communication.
And prepare cheat sheets and emergency resources.
And standardize safety and conduct pre-study drills. So thank you so much, guys. If you have questions, thanks.
Questions?
Oh, sorry. I didn't see.
I just have two specific SOP questions. The first one, do you feel like your clinical and your admin team agree on kind of the volume of SOPs that you should have? Our site specifically, there's a lot of contention about how many we should have and what they should be. Second question, any suggestions on how to downgrade some of those SOPs and have those conversations to shift to more guideline practices?
That is an awesome question. And I feel like a lot of people deal with this at their site probably. I can speak from personally, I come from inpatient nursing, like I said, so I want an SOP for everything that you could possibly have. I want to be able to look it up and I want to be able to read exactly how I'm supposed to do it. And I want to do it that way exactly every time. Coming to research, I do understand that doesn't always work. And like you were saying, there's a SOP for changing your water, which it can very much easily get out of hand, like you're saying. So, no, 100%. I totally believe. So I don't know. I think it's,
I mean, we have Robert.
Robert
which
feels very
honestly,
strongly.
honestly, it's super helpful, I think.
Robert, stand.
No, but I think he's always like, no, it's not an SOP. You know, and it's true. There are things. Right.
Yeah.
100%. And like we said, like if things are, like especially the audible things, like of course, there are things that it is appropriate for.
Correct.
But it can very easily get out of hand. And then you're stuck if you don't follow them exactly. Like it.
Having open communication with each other too, you know, expressing your concerns and listening to one another. There's definitely some things that are pretty clear and cut dry and others that aren't. So,
and I would think,
I wish I had better
yeah,
advice.
no, but I mean, anything, we work closely with our clinic. So if there are things that are working within the clinic that are SOPs that need to be followed, 100%. We talked about our institution is very strict about a lot of things. So those, obviously we take a back seat on, like that is where we're working that, of course, we do those. But I wouldn't say we end up having much conflict with that though.
Yeah, we've pretty much
with our clinic.
Good question.
I don't know. Oh, it is on, I think. So thank you so much. This was so good. My question is the safety stuff in particular, like the preparation has definitely left me like pondering a lot because I do sometimes feel like when we have feasibility visits, it's a question. Okay, do you have a crash cart? Do you have this? Do you have that? And it's like, well, we have codes and we know how to call them. Am I running that? Absolutely not. And so like, can you clarify kind of the difference or what your experience has been between like your hospital having the policies for safety and codes and how that is applicable or not to meeting the study standards? Does that make sense?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I can reframe it if needed. Okay.
You know, I think we too, our hospital, in fact, does not really encourage non-licensed staff to be in that role. And I think our non-licensed staff, when I approached them about this, were like, yeah, we have no idea what to do. And we have a lot of nurses, but we approached it really as like, what can they do to assist us in a code situation? If we're going to be in clinic, there's going to be 100 people there very quickly. But for them, I think we were mainly addressing it for when clinic is quieter or we're there after hours. You know, what obviously the hands-on patient stuff has to be a nurse, but they can run and get us stuff. And that was like sort of what we tried to stress was knowing where things are is super helpful. Like I said, knowing where some of them didn't even know we had a code cart in the unit. Why would they? The AED, we also have that on our code cart. It was a great refresher for us too, because I think we do practice in general in the hospital. And I was on like a research unit that was run more like an inpatient unit too. But there's a lot of we try very hard to not ever have non-licensed staff be alone in the clinic.
I was going to say, be really aware of your scheduling and who's supporting you and the planning for that. Even if it doesn't seem like something would be needed in any specific time, just knowing who your person would be if something were to come up and sort of having that in mind, I think. Having those licensed personnel be support for sure.
And this might be a stupid question, but
something?
everybody, like when you say having a licensed person on hand, are those people that are knowledgeable of the study or knowledgeable of how to
That's a good
be
question.
safe?
Sorry. We mean like a medical certified to perform, say, CPR or something along those lines. So for us as being nurse coordinators, we kind of luckily have that training, but our research coordinators who don't have that specific role of a nurse or something along those lines don't necessarily get provided that.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. Okay. It's an SOP question. So that am I through now? How can you guys hear me?
Oh, sorry. SOP guidelines. Question. I mean, and even your manager can answer this. So I came to my institution with, if your SOPs aren't being followed, it's a finding. And of late, I don't know that other people really understand that. So I'm going to take this back, and I hope I get access to your slides and yours, because next month we're doing a training. When you guys are sitting down and reviewing your SOPs, I'm on our SOP committee right now, we're updating them. How can you say, like, okay, we have an SOP for study implementation. When you were talking about, do you guys sit down, talk about who's who in the zoo? We do that, and we have an SOP for that. And the other day they were saying, do we need an SOP for that? Yes, because if you don't follow it, then it doesn't get done, right? But does it have to, I'm just really struggling with how I can bring back to my site and say, this SOP has to exist because we have to follow it, so we're all doing the same thing. And we're not. We had one of our studies who, in oncology, she didn't realize that she needed to include the person who does insurance pre-authorization in the study planning, because some studies are built to insurance, like activities, and now this patient might not get, it's been fixed. But at the time, she was like, oh my gosh, who's going to pay for that bill? I'm like, well, did you include the pre-auth person in your implementation and planning meeting? I've never had one of those. But we have an SOP for that. So how do you guys get people to follow the SOP?
That's really hard. I think a lot of it seems also a common theme. Training and onboarding processes at institutions aren't always as awesome as they could be necessarily. And so not everyone always has the same access to it. Like you were saying, the nurses sort of got thrown to the wolves in your presentation. I think being conscious of that is super crucial, because if you can teach people from the get how to do something properly, maybe then necessarily it doesn't have to be an actual SOP, but the knowledge is there and it's correct across the board from the get, you know?
And we use, like, I'd say, like, a guidance document. We use it like an SOP, but we're
Yeah.
not named as an SOP
So we
to sort of
can't be
protect
audited on
ourselves
it,
from-
but we, yeah, exactly.
I
So
think
change
that's
the
part of it.
title.
So we definitely have guidance.
Yeah.
Plenty of guidance
Change the
documents,
title.
checklists still, but I think, yeah, we're just really careful about naming things as SOPs to make sure, like I said, there are things, pharmacy, we have some, SOPs about pharmacy and drug return, and
Yeah,
we definitely have them, but try and be careful about.
yeah.
Just one comment about SOPs and guidance documents. We got away from SOPs a long time ago for all the reasons that you're saying. We had them. We had a sponsor audit, and they got us into a lot of trouble because they're really hard to follow, right? And then you have to have an SOP for having SOPs. And I think that's
particular. They're
that's
very
when I
particular.
reached
That's the
my
point of
limit with
Yeah.
SOPs, right? But
Right.
to answer your question about, or as Robert said, when you really, maybe there's one way to do something and you need an SOP for those particular situations, that's when we make the checklist part of the guidance document. Like in the guidance document, blah, blah, we call them all guidance documents. We try and make them really detailed. And then for some that really need to be done a certain way, we say, as part of this guidance document, follow the checklist, right? And then when you're doing, like for one example is the informed consent guidance document. And then the checklist is part of that, and everybody goes through and checks off, yes, 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 yes. So maybe it's a way,
Yeah,
right,
great.
to
I like that.
help
Very, very
be sure that you're doing something the right way and that everybody's doing it the one correct way without calling it an SOP.
Yeah, so they can't
Right.
hold
And
your-
some of the guidance documents have a checklist incorporated and some don't. It just depends on, are they those kinds of situations that really need to be done a very specific way? We haven't been called out yet for not calling them SOPs, even those really specific ones, but that so far has worked for us.
That's a great suggestion. Well, thanks. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so Maya and I are going to do unexpected departures. And you're stuck with us because our whole lovely presenter teams are all on stable, very, very stable teams. So when we're asking who wants to speak about sudden departures, they're all like, we can't even talk about it because we've 21 years with the same group. Like, that's amazing. So you're stuck with us because both Mael and we've gone through RC turnover this year. I forget, am I starting? Okay, so CF is so specific and our research is so important and our patients are why we do this. And so together for CF, every day, every task, every time. And so I'm just going to take you on a little UAB story. I started in 2022. My previous research experience was in oncology. And we were my team's over here. We were a very stable team, 2 years, we were good. And then 2025 hit and we had an RC that left in April, became a monitor, and our financial officer left in March. She decided Excel spreadsheets weren't her thing anymore. She wanted to go bake bread. And so now we're in, which is great, good for her, completely changed everything. But we just went from our very stable 5 RC team, well-oiled machine, had our studies going to now it's sink or swim. Okay, how are we going to do this? Who's taking what? We have to make sure our active patients are taken care of. Luckily, we have a new RC starting in November, so that's great. But there's training, so it's not like they can come in and just start. So we're still figuring things out. What's going in the parking lot? Who's taking these new studies that are coming up? And so that's part of UAB's turnover.
Okay, let me share a little bit of history about Baylor. I started as a senior research coordinator in 2022. That time we have 4 research coordinators. And shortly after, one of them left the same year. We already brought some challenges with staff transitions. And then in 2023, our lead research coordinator left, which means more adjustment and redistribution and responsibilities at that time. We brought a new research coordinator that year who needed full training. We spent a long time with her, but she only stayed with us for 1 year. And later the same year, we have to train another new research coordinator who were once again a cycle on onboarding and mentoring process. Finally, in 2024, we welcomed Jed to another new research coordinator, and we continue to build a more stable and experienced Dan. So as you can see, it's been quiet, a journey of change, resilience, and continue training. But also it's a story and growth and commitment of keeping our research team together and try to forward despite our turnover. However, I would like to bring some tips and tricks, what we learn about all this process and keep our team, everybody in different side, some departure, something every team face at some point. Without warning, we have learned our first reaction is as much as oh my God, what can I do? We don't know a guideline what to do in this time. The immediate step to acknowledge is the emotional impact. People feel unsettled, and sometimes it's we don't know, stressful for what can I do, but that is normal, We try to ensuring that the key information is documented, everybody know, and talk all this morning is very important to describe any detail. That's me, I just mentioned, is not important. Phone call, I forgot to label some lab detail. This maybe we consider a stupid detail, but this is helpful at the end when we do an audit at that time. Important, of course, clear communication, transparency. I feel sometimes we imagine everybody know the information, where is the information, but in the meantime, sometimes it's confusion, not clear. And when we have clear communication, I feel it's very important that. Build a culture, a team. Sometimes be rewarding. Sometimes it's important, sometimes we do a training, certification in our team, a small detail, celebrate birthdays. Feel you're really rewarding a team, you grow personal, like it's your family, because most of the time we stay 8 hours every day with the team, okay? Finally, I want to celebrate achievement, chat in each team members. Again, it's a family, we're part of this family, and I'm more in the community for CF, and try to be transparency. I feel like that's the most important part, okay? And we have these great teams, don't just work, they care, and that's important to take it from here.
Okay, so RC turnover is going to happen, and so I kind of just wanted to end on a positive note on the why we stay. And so I have a patient that was on a study of mine, and he was 12, and it was a study that allowed him to try a modulator, and just the excitement and the dancing of, we checked weight, oh, he gained a pound, and we're doing a happy dance, or, oh, his PFT went up 2 points, we're doing a happy dance. And so to see that, and that RCs, we matter into these lives and our patients, but then also on the other note, where I have another patient, and I put him on my wish list, and to know that he's still not eligible, and he's in and out of the hospital every 2 weeks, and so to know our work is, we're working to the goal, cure found. And so he's my why. He's on my wish list. I want to get him healthy enough to get in a study so that we can do a happy dance too. So that's my why. But so I kind of wanted to open it up. It's going to be a little different because we are on such stable teams. I kind of want to hear your why, or what do you guys do as a team that matters to you, and that's why your team has stayed, why you guys feel so, what are the little things you guys do, or team building, or just different parts that make a difference to you, or your why?
So I started research because of my daughter. She wouldn't be on medications. She's got Crohn's. She wouldn't be getting the treatments that she get without research. And so I feel like that's what keeps me staying. I also don't ever want to leave this job because I feel like I make a difference. I was in school when I started, and I was actually going to nursing school. I got really sick. I had to take a step back, and my manager saw something in me. I'm really not sure what at the time, but she's like, I think you would like research. You have ADHD, and research is constantly moving, and there's all these different protocols, and I think you would stay on task with those. And 15 years later, here I am. But that's my why. And I only left my other home. I was at my other institution for 21 years. I left because they forced me to go to Idaho, which is fine, but I didn't want to pay the tax, and I didn't want to drive that far. So I went to Providence because I had been there the whole time. Our company got bought by Kootenai, blah, blah, blah. And when I came back in 2021 to the Providence campus, I felt like I'd come home. And I've always felt that way. And when I look out and see Lauren and Dr. Lambert, sorry, I get emotional because I really do love what I do. Yesterday I didn't. I hated it. I wanted a new job. It's okay. I moved on. But this job is hard. And thank goodness there's medication, free therapy, and good coworkers. We're trauma bonded, but we do make a difference in people's lives. And sorry, I do when I see my coworkers struggling, I break down with them. We go down to the basement and we cry, and we're like, you got this. It's a hard job, but you got this. And trust me, I wouldn't be here 15 years later if I didn't really believe that I got this. So
I would say number one is over the course of 2 decades, seeing our patient population change and the therapies that have come, and just how much has happened, and to have played a part in that is just remarkable. Some of those studies that we did, and we got FDA audited, and then they got approved, and then patients could be on them, and it was just so exciting. So to be able to see the fruits of your effort is huge. And then my team, just love them like family, and we just offer each other grace and support at every opportunity, and know that everybody's doing the best they can and try to help each other out.
Hello. Okay.
So when I started my career as a nurse, I actually worked on a medical unit that cared for cystic fibrosis kids. And at our institution years ago, you may have heard of this, we had a Burkholderia dolosa outbreak. If you're not familiar, that cepacia is fatal. And those kids that were colonized were segregated to this one unit. They couldn't go anywhere else. It was hard. I cared for them. They stayed in the hospital with us for months upon end at times. We were their family. And a lot of them died. Most of them died before they had their first kiss or drove a car, graduated school. So the opportunity to participate in something where kids growing up now won't have to have that is important to me. And I love the people I work with. They're really nice. Like you said, we're all trauma bonded. And yeah, I think working with such a small team makes a difference for me.
Yeah, same. We're lucky. Get to work with like my best friend. So it's like, but I think, yeah, my why definitely the patients, especially my littles. You know, we have a lot of families, they're super hesitant first to get involved with research. And then there's one thing that we can do to reach out. I did a clinical blood draw for a patient and they were like, okay, we'll try it. And then for them to move into like being in studies for years and coming back over and over again and just saying how much it has changed their lives to be in the study, like that is amazing. And the timing of since I've started working in CF research, it was right after I think Orkambi was approved around that time. So, and then being part of like the ETI trials, like to literally see something go from the clinical trials to being approved. And it's amazing. That's like the coolest thing to be able to say that you were a part of that. And I've been really blessed on our team to have really good mentors too. So I work with Robert Fowler and Monica Ulez is our nursing manager, and she has been such a mentor to me my whole career. You know, I was a research coordinator first. I went back to nursing school and then came in thinking I wanted to work in pediatric oncology. And she was like, no, you want to work in CF. You know, Monica was like very much pulled me in and has always encouraged me, you know, to advance in my career at the hospital and also within this world, encouraging me to do all sorts of opportunities and that. And I think that leadership in the TDN has really tied in me and a lot of members of our team to want to stay. It's a great network.
Thank you, guys. I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to present. I know we're right at time, but I just want, like, our goal is that our RCs are more prepared for FDA audits and basely studies. I hope you got some tricks. I know I have tons of notes from them. We are your phone a friend. If you have any extra questions, all the contact info's on there. Thank you so much for all your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. See you the next year, okay? A wonderful day. Enjoy the day.